Welcome to the Factoid podcast. You didn't ask for it, but we're going to tell you anyway. My name's Chris Humphreys.
And I'm Peyton Gessel. Today's a very special episode because most of our episodes, well, really all of them to this point, are just dumb things that Chris and I like to research for fun on our own. We're very easily entertained in that way. And we know that some of you in our audience are as well. And we decided to, every 10 episodes, we're committing to it at this point, I guess. Every 10 episodes, we thought it would be fun to have our listeners submit ideas for episode topics, and then we would do the research for these and let everyone know about it. So, without further ado, we're going to get into our first listener-submitted podcast episode.
So Peyton, when you're sitting around with your friends or with your family or whatever, and you guys want to watch a movie, how do you go about choosing what movie to watch?
Well, the simple answer is that I would have already decided several days earlier. I really don't like to improvise movie choices, and normally if I'm going to sit down and watch a movie, especially at home, I am not doing just whatever we feel like in the moment. It's an appointment viewing. So, for example, Here pretty soon, Barbie and Oppenheimer are actually both coming out in theaters on my birthday. And I thought, wouldn't it be funny if we got some friends together and watched this as like a double feature? And Oppenheimer's like 3 hours, so I'm sure we're going to be destroyed by the end of it.
Sure.
But I've been thinking a lot about like, what is the proper viewing order? Do you start happy and get depressing, or do you just get like audioly and visually assaulted by Oppenheimer for 3 hours, and then maybe that makes Barbie even funnier? I don't know. But to kind of get back to the question that you're asking, Chris, I've decided, or my wife has decided, or whoever I'm going to watch the movie with. Heck, I'm part of a movie club that meets once a month, and we actually have the full year's list of movies already selected. So we don't even have to think about, hey, what are we going to do next month? We know, and it was announced in January.
That's probably the way to go about it, honestly. And it's funny. It's really funny. Like, it makes sense that your answer would be that, and my way of going about it is the way that mine is, because we've learned this about each other. Other people might know it from the podcast, might not. You're a lot more organized than I am.
Sure.
You use a calendar properly. I use a calendar to tell me to take out the trash, and I still forget to take out the trash. You know what I'm saying? Like,
it's okay. I actually forgot to take the trash out last night, and that's my responsibility. So it does happen. I set reminders, but I still forgot to do it.
Well, okay. Well, that makes me feel a little better. But when Kirsten and I are sitting around, we'll often have friends over, and we don't really have a plan for the night. We'll just talk, and we'll just hang out, and sometimes we'll decide we're going to watch a movie, or we're going to watch a TV show. And for us, the general way of going about it is, I say, what do you guys want to watch? And Kirsten says, I don't know, what do you want to watch? And the other person says, I don't know, what do you want to watch? And I say, I'm not sure, why don't we look around? And so we'll look on Netflix, and we'll look on Hulu, and we'll look on Amazon, we'll look on HBO, and we'll look on whatever, right? Because everybody's got all the stuff. And after 45 minutes to an hour of looking, we still don't know what to watch. And it's kind of become a running joke in my family because Kirsten almost every single time says, well, let's just watch Blackfish. And if you don't know, Blackfish is a documentary about orcas, right? Killer whales. Pretty interesting documentary. And to be fair, we've watched it numerous times after searching and not knowing what to watch. And we watched it first, obviously, as the first choice. But then when we don't have a choice, now it's kind of the default. And it's a running joke because she says it every time. But it's a pretty good one. It's definitely worth watching. But this documentary about whales that's very informative, doesn't actually address this newfound drama going on with whales today, right? You've probably heard some about it.
Yes.
I've heard not very much about it. I'm not on the TikTok like a lot of you guys are. I personally watch YouTube Shorts. I know they're not. I know they're different. Okay, excuse me.
Every time you've talked about YouTube Shorts to me before, and every time you mention YouTube Shorts, I'm imagining you have a pair of like gym shorts, and there's like like the red play button is on them. Logo. You get like 100,000 subscribers, and instead of giving you the plaque, they just give you these YouTube Shorts.
YouTube Shorts, exactly. Well, no, YouTube Shorts meaning YouTube's version of TikTok, which honestly is just TikToks after they go on TikTok, basically. I understand. I'm only fooling myself here, but I watch YouTube Shorts. I don't have TikTok, and I guess this is going around on TikTok a lot. So basically, we were submitted a question by our listener Chaley, and it's all about how whales are apparently randomly attacking boats in the ocean, just like seemingly unprovoked, whales coming up and disabling or sinking, even in some cases, bothering boats. And it's pretty wild because whales are generally considered, even in the documentary Blackfish, they'll talk about how when not in captivity, whales are like not an aggressive fish. They're not, or mammal, or whatever you want to say. Are they mammal? I don't even know. What's a whale? I should know that.
Oh man, we're going to look really dumb if we're wrong, but I assume a whale is similar to a dolphin that makes it a mammal because they
Right.
do eventually have to go up to the surface to,
Right.
to breathe.
Right. So whales are smart and they're not aggressive. They're just, they seem to be one with the ocean, right? They're not usually known for doing that kind of stuff. They are huge, right? They're like giant school buses in the water. They're literally like, they're huge. I wish I've never been able to see one, but we were in Gulf Shores, Alabama for a vacation. We were on a dolphin watching trip, and they said if we go out a couple miles, there's a chance we might see a whale. But it'll take the entire trip and we might not see dolphins. And so everyone said, let's just see dolphins.
Yeah, so I actually have seen whales one time. When my wife and I were on our honeymoon, we went to Maui and we paid to do like an Airbnb experience where we went and kayaked out out into the ocean a little ways. And we were able to see whales where they come to the Hawaii area in January and then they go to Alaska up in the summer. So we were able to see them like definitely jump up and in and out of the water. I didn't hear them, but there was a point when Amy put her ears under the water, like she got out of our kayak and was listening, and she could actually hear like the noises from the whales.
That's so cool. Like they're just such an amazing, I feel like, and maybe it's because I'm raised in Illinois, I live in Ohio, I'm like completely landlocked, but that kind of stuff seems like not even real. You know what I mean? Like, but that's so cool. Like that's amazing. So I've never seen them before in real life. I've never been to SeaWorld or anything like I don't even think they don't really do that anymore with
I don't
whales.
think so.
And that's kind of, Blackfish is kind of about that, right? So like you can't really just go and see a whale in a big pool anymore. Which is sad, but probably good. I don't know. But I would love to see one. But apparently they're just starting to attack boats. And it's happened like hundreds and hundreds, like over 500 times.
Whoa.
Like hundreds and hundreds of times. Not just like once or twice, like this is happening a lot, right? So we're talking like weekly occurrences. And this is happening mostly in the Strait of Gibraltar, right? Way overseas. And so for a long time, that's how it was. It's been like the past 3 years that this has been happening. And so it could have almost been assumed that there was just like one little area where there was like a bad pod or like this gang of whales that are just doing these things, right? And for some reason they have something against these boats and they're the ones that are doing it. And it could almost be just kind of explained as just don't go there, that happens there, whatever, right? But what's happened recently, just in the past few days, so today, this would be at the end of June this is when we're recording this episode. Something that came up just recently is attacks started happening in the North Sea, which is over 1,000 miles away from the Strait of Gibraltar. And so people are wondering, why is this happening in the first place, right? Why is it no longer isolated? What's going on to where now it's moved from one place to another, not just a little ways, but a long ways? And why is this happening, right? And the answer's still not necessarily clear. But what they think, basically, is that people evolve, things evolve, right? And so whales are starting to, for some reason, have something against boats, right? This is simple. This is the simple way. Something's happening where whales have something against boats, and they're teaching the people around them and their young and their families, hey, we don't like that boat. Let's do the thing, right? And so there's actually been, there's been an account where this guy who was on his boat, like this happened years ago, his boat started getting attacked by whales, and he was in the boat, right?
Was his name Captain Ahab?
I don't think so.
Okay.
Sadly, I don't think it was, right? But this happened to him, right? And it was kind of a big thing. Well, just recently, in the same place, this guy's out on the water and it starts to happen again. And he said the first time, right, it was like a group of them. And the first time it happened, it took like over an hour. It was kind of this crazy, terrifying experience to be a part of. And there wasn't much communication. They were just kind of randomly thrashing about and trying to take down the boat. Well, this time he looks down, he sees a group of them swimming around him, like kind of in circles. And he says like audibly, like, oh no, not again. And this time it's like tactical. Like, they're like growing in their ability to attack boats, not just like in the fact that they are, but like he said, this time it took like 15 minutes and they communicated really well and they knew what they were doing, which is weird, right?
I'm imagining like we'll say 11 killer
11.
whales in a huddle,
Right.
and they're calling trips right, 80, razzle dazzle, on 3, ready break, and then they go and destroy this boat. I'm assuming.
Yes, literally. And again, remember, these are school buses in the water, right? So these things, like, picture yourself in that situation. No. That'd be insane.
Yeah.
They're bigger than the boat you're in, probably. I guess I don't know how big the guy's boat was. I didn't look that deep into it, right? But this is happening, right? So they're evolving not only in the way that they attack and the way that they think, but also in the locations that they are doing this, right? And so scientists think, this is crazy, scientists think this came from one old, and I quote, grandmother whale, okay? They call her White Gladys. And they think that she was wronged in some way. This specific whale was wronged in some way by people or a boat. And then she taught her offspring, we don't like boats. And all of those taught their own pods, we don't like boats. And this was isolated for long enough, but it went on long enough that their pod became friends with another pod, and they started splitting it up. And the way that whale migration patterns work, right, which I don't really know, but apparently they go somewhere from the Strait of Gibraltar to the North Sea. It's starting to spread. And so people at this point, I would anticipate, as you guys listen to this episode, there's probably new news on this. There's probably more that have happened, and people are maybe even getting more concerned. And so scientists don't know when it's going to stop. They don't know if it's going to get worse. They think it'll probably go away. People will get over it. But they really don't know. They also think it's possible that it's linked to the bluefin tuna migration.
Oh, okay.
Because apparently bluefin tuna are like, I guess it's like they hunt for them, right? And so they travel in schools, and they think, and bluefin tuna are huge too, right? Yeah. In fact, I'm pretty sure, if I'm not mistaken, bluefin tuna are like one of the like most expensive fish. Like super, anyway.
I'm pretty sure they're used for sushi. I know yellowfin definitely is, but I've heard bluefin tuna is very prized.
And so they link it possibly because these are huge fish, and so they think that it's possible that visually they look kind of like boats, or a group of boats could look kind of like a school of bluefin tuna, and so, but they think it's probably more likely, which is wild, that like they basically the humans have wronged whales, and whales are mad at humans basically, or boats per se, not really humans. That's wild, right?
Absolutely. I've been hearing a lot about this as well. And I came across an article in The Atlantic, which is also funny that it's a website named after an ocean, but it's titled, "Killer Whales Are Not Our Friends. Stop Rooting for the Orcas Ramming Boats." But I've seen a lot of people online who have been rooting for the orcas, and I think they view it as a way to have the animals get back at the rich, because not that only rich people have boats, but a lot of people who have boats often have a lot of money. You think about like yachts specifically. Right. And some people went and did some research into the guy who wrote this article, and he is a Yale graduate, and get this, his last name is Stern. So people feel like he actually has some ties to boats, and maybe he's trying to defend himself because he, I don't know, he's part of Big Boat.
Sure, Big Boat. He thinks he's being wronged, and he wants to write.
He sees this as a personal attack.
I do think people are talking a lot about it because they're trying to like point out the, I guess, negative like economical implications of like boating, and you know what I mean, like that kind of things, like being bad for the earth, and we don't take good enough care of the wildlife in the ocean. Like that's a big thing, and so I think that's like, people are upset by that, and that's another reason maybe people are rooting for the whales over the people. Is like, oh, get the big boats out of the water. We want the ocean clear.
Only rafts made of twigs tied together, please. If it doesn't look like it came from the movie Castaway, we can't go on it. Chris, it's time we had the talk. And by that, I mean, we need to talk about the birds, the bees, and the eels. For the longest time, people didn't know much about eels and how they reproduced, or the better question is, if they reproduced at all. So, I have a question here from Miles. Miles wants to know where eels come from. And I know that sounds kind of silly when you say it like that, but basically he had recently heard that eels just kind of appear in the ocean and nobody really understands like how they reproduce and what that whole process even looks like. I learned a ton about eels that I had no idea about because of this. So thank you so much for writing in about this. It's been a mystery for thousands of years what eels really are, where they come from, why they're here, but they have been tied to history for a long time. So for example, the ancient Egyptians thought that eels, they sprang out of the Nile when the water was warmed by the sun, and that's just, here's where new eels come from. Aristotle said that they came out of the depths of the earth. Pliny the Elder said that when an eel scrapes against a rock, a little bit of the skin falls off and that just grows into a new eel. Like, these were the smart guys back then, and none of them thought that they just like reproduced like any other animal.
Huh.
And I think my favorite old-timey eel story that I learned actually has to do with the Catholic Church. So around Middle Ages time, before the Renaissance, there were a lot of rules, and there are some that are still followed today regarding what you were allowed to eat when you are around certain holy times of the year.
Uh-huh.
And one of those is around Christmas, and specifically different parts around Christmas Eve. You're not supposed to eat anything that was the result of a carnal act. So that rules out most meats. And once you get to sundown on Christmas Eve, you were then allowed to eat fish. And eels were definitely a preferred thing that you could eat during this time because at the time, Thomas Aquinas is on record saying that, like, well, eels are okay because, like, they're not produced from a carnal act. Like, we don't know how they come about. And while this isn't like an official feast that's part of Catholicism, it's something that's kind of been brought out of it. And today we know that as the Feast of the Seven Fishes. And like, I know somebody who likes to go to their grandma's house every year for the Feast of the Seven Fishes.
Huh.
And one of the seven, I'm pretty sure, is specifically eel. And it is now a staple in like that tradition. And part of the reason it's there is just because like 1,000 years ago, we didn't know where eels came from.
Because it couldn't be explained, so it's got to not be the same.
Right. And if you look at like different mythology, like you have like Roman gods appearing out of someone's forehead and things like that. So it's not the
Sure.
craziest thing for them to think that, but nowadays it definitely is.
Sure.
So in preparation for this episode, I did eat some eel. I went to my local Japanese grocery store, and they have a lot of prepackaged meals, and they will just like make little lunches for people to take. And I had some eel prepared with a bed of rice and a lot of eel sauce on it. And eel sauce sounds like something gross that you like ring an eel.
Gross.
Yes, it's just like soy sauce and sugar. It's basic. They call it like Japanese barbecue sauce. It's actually pretty good.
Can you get eel sauce with other food? Or is it
you-
specifically for eel?
I've only heard it being used with eel. Like there are a lot of other dishes that have something similar on it. You could make it at home. It's like 4 ingredients.
Okay.
But one thing that I found interesting as we're going a little bit closer to the modern day, in the 1800s, Sigmund Freud has heard all of these stories about like we don't know how or even if eels reproduce. So he just starts buying hundreds of them. And he buys hundreds of eels. He goes down to the local, I don't know, wharf. Where do you buy an eel at, I guess? And he just takes them back to his lab and he just starts dissecting them. And he dissects hundreds of them. And he's hoping to just find like evidence of an egg or any sort of organs that would say like, yes, this is where new eels come from. And he can't find anything. And like for the longest time, eels were very popular in society. Like I know I had to go to a specialty grocery store just to find eel to eat, but like in Europe and even parts of America back in the day, this was like a part of everyday life. You could actually like pay for things with eels in certain situations. Wow. And there's a guy that I follow online now who's called the surprised eel historian. He has been documenting like the cost of eels, and like, I don't think you could buy a house with eels, but he's done the math to say like how many eels would it cost you like to buy a house. And yeah, like, so I think
one of the things I love about the internet is that you found a guy named the eel historian.
Yeah.
I love that.
Yeah, he has two specialties, eels and map making. And he recently quit his day job of being a college professor, and now he's just going into making custom maps for people. So if you have like a D&D campaign and I'm going to guess a lot of money, you can just pay for him to make like an accurate map, and he can also tell you fun facts about eels.
That's probably such a fun job for him.
Oh, absolutely. He's living his best life.
Yeah, he sure is. That's what he's made for.
Yeah. So a question I had for you, Chris. You know a lot more about fish than me. You've gone fishing a lot. I barely went fishing. Have you ran into eels ever? Do you know much about eels in relation to fishing? Have you ever caught an eel?
I've never caught an eel. I've never run into an eel, never seen an eel. I saw a YouTube video, guy who I watch who goes fishing. Mm-hmm. I think it was in DC somewhere near the coast, and he like caught one like it was normal, which I thought was weird, but that's how like fishing and hunting and all that works. Like things are really normal in some places that you just never see, right? So he caught an eel and he chopped it up and caught catfish with it. So I assume it's pretty much like, I guess from that video, I would assume it's basically just like any other fish. And, but no, I've never seen one.
Okay. And it makes sense that the guy, if he was around the DC area, that he was able to find one, because as we kind of enter the more modern age, we have a lot of scientists who are trying to learn about different deep sea animals, and even, and eels specifically. And we've learned a little bit more about their stages of life. And the problem is that we have only been seeing baby eels. Almost every single interaction that a human has with an eel is not with a mature adult eel. So eels have roughly 4 basic times in their life. They have like, I don't know the correct term here, but basically like the little baby eel's born and it's almost nothing, and it's floating around, and it's starting in the ocean, and it is floating into freshwater areas. You start to get towards rivers and things like that on the coasts. And eventually they turn into what's called a glass eel. They're a little bit larger, but they're transparent. And you can see through them. And that's why they call them glass eels. And as they get a little bit older, they start to develop color to them. And that is when almost everyone sees eels. But technically, they are not mature. And they will basically stay in this third stage of life for an unknowable amount of time. I guess we somewhat know, but it's not very predictable. There are times when the eel is like this for 5 years. There are times when it's several decades.
Wow.
The eel is just in this form with no real proof of where an eel comes from. And just one day, like, it decides it is time. It turns around and it starts swimming to the Bermuda Triangle. There is an area inside of the Bermuda Triangle in the Atlantic Ocean, and it's called the Sargasso Sea. And with the way ocean currents work, that sometimes there are certain parts of an ocean that kind of have currents that move in a circle. And inside of that circle, the water is a little bit more calm. And because of that, it's a little bit easier for animals to hang out in this area and not get like moved around and swept up as much. So at that moment in time when the eel says it's go time, it will start swimming in the direction of this sea. And you have ones in America and ones in Europe, and they're all converging on this spot. And they swim towards the Bermuda Triangle, and right around then is when they finally develop all of their organs and fully mature. They go, they mate, and then they die right afterwards.
No way.
So like the reason that we know so little about it is because they have just saved like the one point in life when they reproduce to be like the most difficult thing for us to observe. So I've done a little bit more research since then, and there has been proof. Like humans have witnessed it. They do know that eels can reproduce in captivity, but they have to inject hormones into them to make this happen, because ultimately, like, they never know how long it's going to take. And obviously, like with certain animals, when they become endangered, or if you're trying to keep like the population going, you need to have them reproduce on a certain amount of like time frame. So to kind of answer the question, like, eels do reproduce the same way that all fish do, but they just do it in their own time.
So we all grow up with fashion rules, right? Things our parents tell us we can't wear. Or what? My mom would not let me wear shorts until it was like hot outside. I remember always wanting to wear shorts when it was the first warm day, and she's like, "No, it's not warm out. Just wait till it's..." And I did, whatever. Now I wear shorts all the time, even through the winter. But are there any things, any specific times or any specific events that maybe you and your wife, do you guys like to match ever or anything like that?
Yeah, actually, we do. I feel like I never took a poll to ask people, but I feel like we do think about it a lot, and more than I would assume most couples do.
Sure.
Some of the problems is that sometimes we will match without trying, without even comparing ahead of time. And then we both get ready to go out the door somewhere, and we just look at each other and we say, like, that's too far. Like, people are going to make fun of us because it looks like we tried so hard. But I mean, there are other times, like if we were doing like if we know we want to get like a good picture of the two of us on a certain day, we're going to make sure that our outfits are complementary, where
Sure.
maybe there's a little bit of color in my pants that matches her shirt or
Sure.
something. We do not have any like true matching outfits. Like, it's not like we ever said like, oh, here is our matching Christmas onesies or something. So yeah, I would say we do it a decent amount.
Sure. Well, I would say, I think that's normal. I think you, like you said, maybe you think about more, but I don't know. I think people think about that a lot. We're pretty bad at it, Kirsten and I. We often will get to a place where people are taking photos together, and we'll think, why didn't we like prepare for this more? We should be doing this too. But sometimes, like you said, randomly we'll get to the door, and I think it's specifically because we both have like a bunch of free t-shirts that we got at events, right? Or that someone gave us. They're free t-shirts. We both have the same one. And often we'll get to the door and we'll be wearing the exact same t-shirt, and Kirsten will look at me and say, no. You have to go change your shirt. I'm going to go change. We can't be wearing this because you're right, because people are going to look at you funny, right? Well, but there's all kinds of fashion rules that we follow every day, right? All kinds of them. And there's one that I want to talk about specifically today. It was brought up to us by Ryan, and he asked, why are you not allowed to wear white after Labor Day? And this is a question that I've heard. This is a thing that I've heard said. This is a fashion rule that's supposed to be followed. I've heard it my whole life. And I don't listen to it, to be honest, because the fact of the matter is I wear the same thing all the time no matter what. I just don't care that much.
Recently, I've been making a big deal about it.
Okay.
Where in the past few years, as we're getting towards the end of August, I'll say something to Amy about like, well, I gotta wear it while I can.
That's so funny. I literally, like, I just wear whatever all the time. I wear a t-shirt and jeans or a t-shirt and shorts pretty much every day. And I know that that's not professional, and I'm an adult and I should grow up or whatever. I don't know. I just don't care that much. So I don't really follow it, but I have heard it my whole life. And I've always just assumed a certain thing about it, right? But the fact of the matter is I don't really wear white at all. I never wear white because, well, there's two reasons. Number one, it gets dirty really, really easily, right? And no, I don't, if you know me at all, you know that I can't go anywhere or do anything without getting something all over all articles of clothing, right? My pants, my shirt, everything, right? And in the summertime, which is when you're supposed to be wearing white, you sweat turns white things not white. I have a few undershirts that I would wear like under button-ups or whatever, like and they're not white anymore. They're like this off-white color. They used to be white, but it's just because sweat, I guess. I don't know, right? But the other reason I don't wear it, and this is silly, I understand, is because if I wear a white shirt, you notice how not white my teeth are. and I don't like, I don't like noticing that myself, right? So I just don't really wear white. Specifically shoes. I love white shoes, but I just wear shoes all the time. I don't really like have shoes I wear for special occasions. So like they just get too dirty. I don't wear white that much, but you're not supposed to wear white after Labor Day. And I always assumed, and I thought, I still think, most people think this, right? Why are you not supposed to wear white after Labor Day? What do you think? What's the reason?
My guess is that as the season changes there are different colors in the environment if you live, say, like in a part of America where the fall leaves colors change. And because like the days are getting shorter and you need to wear a color that better matches the season.
Sure. A lot of people think it has to do with colors changing. That's true, right? White is considered like if you think of somebody on a boat, right? They're wearing like light colors like white or white and blue stripes. White is a very summery, sunshiny color. And we're moving into the time where the sun stays out less long and more colors are coming in, like fall leaves and all that kind of stuff, right? So yeah, white is less appropriate in that way. And that's kind of what I assume. But I also maybe assumed white is the color that you're supposed to wear if you want to remain coolest, right? So the sun beats down on you. The darker the clothes you're wearing, the more light gets absorbed, the hotter you feel, right? I just mowed the lawn yesterday in a black shirt, and I realized even though it wasn't that sunny, that was a mistake because I just felt even hotter, right?
I did this a few weeks ago. Exact same thing. Just the way my outfit turned out, I didn't wear this to work, but I got home and I was wearing a black t-shirt, black shorts in summer mowing,
Yes.
and I was so exhausted.
Yeah, it really
afterwards.
it makes a difference. Like it does make a difference. And so I kind of assumed, well, it's starting Labor Day is sort of the symbol that the summer's over and the fall's starting. And so that's basically when the weather gets cooler. So you're just not supposed to wear it anymore, right? And that was my assumption my whole life. And I think that's most people's assumptions, but it turns out that's not the reason.
Oh.
No, that's not it at all, in fact. It's completely different. It's actually much more interesting. See? In the late 1800s and early 1900s, this was an unspoken rule among the wealthy people of the world, right? Don't wear white after Labor Day. And the reason was simple. It was because the wealthy folks who'd been wealthy for generations, who'd always lived in money, wanted to have an unspoken thing that would weed out the wealthy folks who just came into money. And they wanted to have a reason to be able to look down upon these wealthy folks who were newly rich because they'd had money for long enough. So they, in their little gatherings, would say, don't wear white after Labor Day. And they did it enough to where it became unspoken so that anytime they saw someone who was in these uppity communities wearing white after Labor Day, they didn't have to say anything, but they knew that they just came in to money. So they had a reason to look down upon people who they normally had to see in the same social class as them.
That's insane.
I know.
had no idea.
So it was literally a way for rich people to look down upon rich people they considered not good enough to be in their rich communities.
Wow.
It still gets said all the time, but it hasn't really been true for a long time. People, especially now that people like express themselves a lot more through like fashion, it's not so much like rigid and has rules for what you're supposed to wear. It's kind of like people wear what they want to wear whenever they want to wear it. I guess I think Chanel, the person, she was known for being like incredibly wealthy and wearing white all the time, right? So like she started breaking barriers, I guess, back in the day, and so like it became less of a big deal. But literally, it was created so that people had a reason to talk bad about people they considered less than them because they hadn't had money as long as them.
Yeah, that makes so much sense now. There was a TV show that I watched as a kid called Recess. Did you ever watch Recess?
I did, sure did, yeah.
Do you remember the Ashleys from the show?
Yeah, I think so.
Yes, so there's one episode where, for those of you that weren't watching this show 20 years ago, Recess is a show about some kids at a grade school. They're like in 4th grade, and just the shenanigans they get up to on the playground. And there is a group of 3 girls, and they're all named Ashley, and they have a club, and they're known as the Ashleys, and they're very concerned with fashion, and they are also very exclusive. And there's an episode where one of the main characters, everyone finds out that she's been going by her last name for all of these years, and that she is actually named Ashley as well. And the Ashleys are forced to bring her into their group and deal with her, even though she doesn't act like them. And this is kind of a good allegory for, like, they were definitely seen as like the upper crust of the playground, and they had to take in this person who was kind of like the new money into their group. And they worked on her fashion, and I do remember them specifically saying, don't wear white after Labor Day. And that's where I heard the term first. So it seems like the writers of this show definitely knew the origins of this, and it just took me 20 years to discover it. So our last question for today comes to us from Dana. Dana recently saw a video about the evolution of spelling, and she wanted to learn more about why we have silent letters in words. She also recently has been obsessed with spelling bees. Let me tell you all about silent letters in the English language. So, as we all know, we're listening to a podcast in English, so we all understand how weird English is.
Yeah.
But what makes it so weird is mostly due to the political history of England. So if we want to go back to some of the earliest history of what we would call England now, England was run by the people who lived in England are Germanic people, and they spoke a language that was rooted in kind of a German-ish dialect in the way they spoke. And they used an alphabet that was made up of runes. So we always associate English with the Latin alphabet, and that's because the Romans invaded England and they forced them to start using their Latin alphabet for their Germanic-based language. And there were certain things that didn't really translate over really well, just based on the kind of sounds that these two languages made. So there were a few runes that they had to start merging with the Latin alphabet in order to make sounds that didn't exist in Latin. And two of those, one is known as thorn, and one of them is known as win. Win eventually went on to become what we know as W, and thorn is used for the TH sound, the th that we have in a lot of words in English. And a lot of people consider thorn to be the lost letter of the English language, and because it was around for a long time when it was used, and it was eventually fizzled out and just became like the letters T and H. And I found this fascinating when I was learning about this, is that you know how old signs, when someone wants to talk about something being old, they say ye old whatever on it. The letter thorn, depending on what kind of script you read it in, kind of looks like the letter Y. So there were instances where you would have someone write the old blank, but they used the letter thorn and it looked like a Y. So people thought it said ye old now in the present. And since ye is like an old-timey word that kind of means you, they just assume, well, that's how they talked. So the next time you see someone that writes ye old something, just know that it actually was just the old, and we just didn't understand the letter thorn. So while I'm on this tangent, you can tell I'm getting really excited about all of this. I learned about a new rune, and this is definitely my new favorite rune. My new favorite rune is the Bluetooth logo.
Okay.
It's technically a bind rune, which is when two runes are stuck together, but it still counts as one. So if you're thinking of the Bluetooth logo at home, you've got the capital B looking thing, and it's got the little wings in the back. So it's actually a combination of two runes. One of them is called Hagalats, and the other is called Bjarken. And those basically translate to H and B. And that stands for Harold Bluetooth, who was a Danish king from 1,000 years ago. Bluetooth is named after a 1,000-year-old Danish king.
No way.
And the reason Bluetooth is called this is because Harold Bluetooth was known for bringing all of the tribes of Denmark under one rule and making them this united country. And the people that created the Bluetooth system in the modern day wanted to make it so that all of your devices could talk together and be united as one, just like Harold Bluetooth did 1,000 years earlier. The best part is there's a guy that works at Intel back in 1997, and he's making a pitch presentation for this, and he draws this drawing of a Viking holding a phone and a laptop, and he used this in a PowerPoint presentation to pitch them naming it Bluetooth, and it worked.
That I actually respect the name more now. I just assumed it was way less meaningful than that.
Yeah.
It's kind of cool.
Yeah, it's crazy. So to get us back on track, runes, different alphabet, English was maybe not meant to be used in Latin. You're having some problem representing certain sounds with the alphabet it now has. So as you move into the year 1066, William the Conqueror from Normandy, which is in modern-day France, he comes into England and he takes over. And as he is starting to take over the country, he wants to make sure he is spreading his culture and trying to make things in England be a little bit more comfortable and familiar to the Normans. So they start looking at words in their language and change the way that they're spelled. So you have words like house and hound that were spelled like H-U-S or H-U-N-D, and they start adding O's into those words, like H-O-U-S. And then they start to add all of these extra letters that help kind of bridge the gap between this old English language and the Norman language. And probably the biggest shift in the English language, and the reason why we have silent letters, though, is the great vowel shift of English that happened around 1500. It was over the course of a couple of hundred years, but the printing press is invented, the Renaissance is happening, and just with the way culture is shifting, people are changing the way they pronounce vowels. So in the process of changing some of these vowels, some letters go silent. You have words like name, where you might have pronounced it nama before, that now like the E is actually just, it is silenced. Or a word like knife would have been pronounced knife, but the K stays in the word but is now silent. Or the word dumb, you don't pronounce the B same way. And the combination of this vowel shift happening along with the Renaissance, you start to add silent letters into words that they never even needed to exist. Basically, fanboys of Roman culture and fanboys of Greek culture thought, wouldn't it be cool if I could tell the origin of a word based on certain letters that appeared in it? So a lot of English words that were based off Greek words that had an F sound in them, they would change the F to a PH. And there were plenty of words that would have silent letters added, like a silent C, and the word indict would be added to make sure that people knew it came from the Roman culture and the Latin word indictus. So they found it as a way that they could be cool at parties and say, well, I know the origin of this word because of the silent letters in it. And because the printing press is becoming popular, everyone is scrambling to decide, how do we spell words now? Spelling is very important because we need to mass print all of these books. So in the middle of all of these words changing the spellings, they all get kind of solidified while they're halfway through the process. So I wanted to leave you with just one more silent word thing that has been bothering me for a long time. There is a man, he is the CEO of the video game publisher Ubisoft. I've watched him give plenty of press conference speeches over the years. He still works there to this day. He has so many silent letters in his name. His name is Yves Guillemot, and that is spelled Yvesguillemot. Yves Guillemot. And I realize that it's not an English name, but it's a French name. But I always thought it was so crazy how almost half of his name is silent.
That's wild.
Yeah.
So we were talking about this topic on a phone call the other day about the topics we were going to do for this episode. And after that phone call, I just had to look this up. I've talked to you about how interesting tech is to me, specifically artificial intelligence, right? And so I saved this as soon as I did it. I asked ChatGPT to write me a poem using a bunch of silent words. So I just thought I'd read that to you. In a castle of dreams where silence resides, whispers of secrets veiled by tides. A wrist adorned with a silver comb, a timeless tale of love unknown. I didn't realize how many silent letters were in words until I was reading this and being like, there's so many of them. Debt of emotions unspoken and deep, like a thumbprint on a heart forever to keep. Gnomes in the garden, silent and still, guarding the flowers with a mystical thrill. On an island of solitude where the winds sigh, pneumonia of thoughts, a soul's gentle cry. Receipt of longing tucked away in a drawer, honest desires that resonate to the core. Psychology of shadows, the mind's intricate maze, Where wrong turns can haunt in bewildering ways, an hourglass suspended, no sound as it falls, trolleys of memories echoing down empty halls. In the tomb of regrets, forgiveness takes root, need of redemption, a soul's bitter fruit. A yacht sailing silently through midnight's embrace, phonic whispers ancient wisdom and grace. Through words unspoken, a silent symphony, weaving a tapestry of silent letters set free. In this poem, a dance of the silent and still, where the power of silence reigns with tranquil skill.
That is beautiful.
Isn't it actually beautiful?
Yeah. What I thought you were going to do is just pause for 10 seconds. Like this is a John Cage song.
That'd be hilarious.
Yeah. And I think what's great about that poem is it really does show how common silent letters are and how difficult it is to pronounce words due to that.
Mm-hmm.
And to circle back to what Dana was talking about with the spelling bees, one crazy thing I learned about spelling bees is that they only exist in English.
Really?
Yeah. There are almost zero documented spelling bees in languages that aren't English. There are a couple here and there that have tried, but it is like if you read about every single spelling bee that happens in the world, like 95% of them are in English. And they'll even be in countries where English isn't the first language. But because English is the one that's so hard, they're like, well, this is a great competition. The language is so hard to understand that America had to make a game out of it.
So you're saying that the only language we have spelling bees in is English because every other language is so simple to spell things because they just all make sense?
Yeah, there's just so much more, like, and it's not like no one ever has, like, a test in school. Like, I was reading about, like, how Japan does this, because I thought, like, Japan seems like a place that would have spelling bees, and they have so many characters in, like, the kanji alphabet. But no, it's just, like, here's an assessment test that you take when you're in high school. But it's not, like, here is a competition, and it's because it's so hard or whatever. It's, yeah, and there are rules, and, like, there is a rational reason for most languages, and English just doesn't follow any of them. Thank you for listening to the Factoid podcast. As you saw in this episode, we do love getting information from our listeners, and if you have any sort of factoids that you want to tell us about, if you want to give us some new topics for our next listener episode, just send us an email at whatsyours@factoidpodcast.com.
And, as usual, you can find us anywhere you get your podcasts or on our website, factoidpodcast.com.
Except for Stitcher, I think. I got an email that Stitcher is closing down for good. I don't know if anyone even listens on there, but it'll get rolled into Pandora or something. But I don't think any of you do, from what I can tell. So anyways, have fun. We'll see you in 2 weeks.